Hello and welcome to North 100, a Canadian Highlander podcast. I'm Liam, and joining me today are Jer and Alex. No Serge today, but that's okay. We're going to survive. Before we get started, a reminder that everything that's brought to you by the Loading Ready Run Video Network couldn't be done without your help over at patreon.com/loadingreadyrun. So thanks so much for that. We literally couldn't do it without you. And before we get into today's theme, we're going to talk about our opening segment, and that's the best card you're not playing. And today, Alex, I need to know what the best card you're not playing is.
Do you like hauling stuff out of your bin?
Yes.
How about hauling stuff out of your bin at instant speed?
Certainly.
How about hauling stuff out of your bin at instant speed while also milling yourself?
Okay.
For value.
I'm interested.
It's Grapple of the Past. There's one in a green instant. Put the top 3 cards of your library into your graveyard. Then you may return a creature or land card from your graveyard to your hand. This card's super cool. It sees play in like decks that like splash the what's the word I'm looking at? The land like mechanism cards. You know what I'm talking about?
Like landfall?
Yeah, well, sort of not like landfall, but like
it's another way to like rebuy strip mine or
yeah, like you can run
sure,
back
okay.
cards like that. Like there's a little package of land cards and like cares about land cards. It's like you would probably play this in a deck with Gitrog. It's probably like a very surgy card, but yeah, you can wasteland somebody, grapple, get it back, wasteland them a second time. That's pretty cruel.
Yeah, 'cause the most interesting thing I find about this card is many of these cards are templated such that you have to get back one of the cards that you milled.
Yes.
This one doesn't do that.
Yes. So
it lets you get back anything that was there or gets milled, but
So yeah, your chance to brick off this is very low. You can pull something that you know is there already. You can cast this with an empty yard to maybe trying to hit like Hail Mary and grab something that you need if your back is up against the wall. And it also has a cool art callback.
To make a wish.
To make a wish.
yeah.
By cool, you mean horrifying?
Yeah, it's
Creepy.
It's
it's
pretty
horrible.
terrifying, yeah.
Is it just called To Make a Wish? Or
No, it's just
just
make,
make
a
a
wish.
Make a Wish.
Yeah.
From original Innistrad, I think?
Yeah.
Yep.
It's the same well.
And it's that same little girl, just in different
She's
form.
a horrible monster
Yep,
now.
she is now a big,
But she got her
scary
teddy bear
Eldrazi.
back.
Emrakul does not grant wishes. Oh.
Yeah.
And desires simply aligned to her will. So that's good. Oh, this card's awesome.
The card is good.
Yeah, I like it.
Cool. Well, thanks very much for that.
There you go.
So what we're doing for today's theme is we put a tweet out asking what kind of decks people wanted to hear about because, frankly, there's so many decks in the format that we figured we'd ask what the people at home were interested in. And rather than doing one deep dive on one deck an episode, we felt like that wasn't going to be fast enough. So this episode, you're going to get the old deck tech extravaganza, a little mini deck tech, so to speak. We're going to talk about a bunch of different decks, sort of talk about key cards that are in them, try and dispel some misconceptions about them, that sort of thing. So yeah, stay tuned. It's going to be very exciting. And the first deck we're going to talk about is Aristocrats. So Alex, do you want to talk me through the basic idea of what Aristocrats does?
The Aristocrats is essentially, it revolves around the theme of gaining benefit from sacrificing your own creatures or arranging for them to have an accident. There's a couple different builds for it, and a couple of good cards that the deck really revolves around. It's not a combo deck, and it's not an aggro deck, but it has properties of both. Because it's kind of a synergy deck where you set up little arrangements of cards that aren't quite a like I win the game button, but they generate sometimes an enormous amount of value in not quite like infinite loops, but like you can cycle
Powerful
things,
finite
like
loops.
powerful finite loops and powerful sort of effects. It also engages along an axis that sort of blanks certain other strategies, like specifically just like spot removal sucks against this deck.
Even
Sweepers suck against this deck. You're like, thanks. You might literally be doing this deck a favor by blowing up their board.
If it's not Terminus or like Settle the Wreckage, then it's probably pretty bad.
Yeah, and so the name the Aristocrats comes from the fact that there are some cards in Magic, such as like Cartel Aristocrat or Falconwrath Aristocrat.
Yeah, those two were part of the original deck that showed up in Standard.
Yeah, Pro Tour
During
Gatecrash.
Innistrad, yeah.
Sam Black built it.
Yeah.
But they basically, the important thing is they say sacrifice a creature on them.
Yeah. The way you want to build a deck is you want to have a certain ratio of like predators to prey, I think Cam called it once. So thanks, Cam.
That's actually a pretty good description.
You want sack outlets, which is to say cards that facilitate you sacrificing your creatures. And the very best among these are the ones that activate at instant speed with no cost. That's really important. Like even 1 mana is a lot to pay because that changes an infinite number of triggers you could activate to a very finite number. There are a few cards that you will occasionally play that have an activated cost, usually with mana, but most of the best ones are free. So it's stuff like Carrion Feeder or Viscera Seer, or like, actually the very best one is Goblin Bombardment.
Yeah.
It's actually like kind of the reason to play red.
Yeah, well, it's like the deck sort of has three main components to it. It has the predators, the things that sacrifice a creature, the prey, the things that when they die do something, usually leave behind one or more bodies, and then I'm trying to think of another analogy. Like,
things that benefit off of stuff dying.
Yeah, like you want like Blood Artist is the classic one, and the reason Goblin Bombardment's so good is it's a sack outlet and a Blood Artist tied into one card.
Yeah, it's pretty dumb.
Is able to win you the game and sacrifice creatures.
Yeah, so like the little synergies you set up, for example, is you have like a way to sacrifice something that likes being sacrificed, and something that gains a benefit off of that. So, you know, here's an example, like you have Skurstag High Priest.
Yep.
And then like a couple of idiots, maybe that leave behind extra bodies. You sacrifice one, get Morbid active, tap Skurstag High Priest, the sack outlet, and maybe one other creature, and make a demon.
Yeah, and Skurstag High Priest really cool because 1 and a black for a human cleric. This is one of the better ones. It says Morbid, so that means if a creature has died this turn, you can tap it and tap 2 untapped creatures you control, and to put a 5/5 black demon creature with flying token into play. And you can only activate it if a creature has died this turn. That's the Morbid part.
Ordinarily, this effect might be a little difficult to have happen in a normal deck, but a deck where the creatures you have are able to be like you're able to set this up very easily and kind of on command, like when you want. So the sack effects that are free, also most of them you can activate them anytime you want. So you could actually just like end of turn this on, you know, just get a Morbid trigger. Sometimes you'll get another body out of a creature that you made,
your
and then
sprouting
just like
Thrynax.
Yeah, Thrynax is so good in this deck. It's insane.
It's Jund for a 3/3 that makes 3/1/1s when it dies.
And notably, the High Priest doesn't require the other creatures being tapped to be non-summoning sick. You can tap summoning sick creatures, which is really relevant because if you have like this and 2 creatures out, and one of the other creatures you have out leaves behind a body, you can sacrifice one of the creatures.
Yeah.
So at least one of your other creatures is summoning sick, and you're still able to activate this ability.
Here, I'm going to throw you another example of like a combo-like synergy. You have like, say, Blasting Station in play, you have a Blood Artist in play, and then just a bunch of creatures that are like 2-for-1s or even just like 1-for-1s. And your opponent has this board that they virtually can't touch because you can just wipe out the whole board and drain them for a whole bunch of damage, and potentially even just like shoot their creatures if that's relevant. So you're getting like 2 damage, essentially. You're getting 1 point of life loss, or 1 point of drain, and 1 point of directed damage per creature. And you can just be cracking in with impunity with these creatures as well. So you can pressure their board through combat and then pressure them through threat of activation.
Yeah. One thing I find kind of interesting about the Aristocrats deck is that a lot of the time you're sort of like tenuously balancing, when you're playing against it, that is, between like being alive and dying, but it's like not obvious where that line is. Like you'll be at like 15 and you both have a board, and then they draw and play a Blood Artist and you die on the spot because they just have 15 creatures they can sacrifice. Like due to things recurring, or like they get to do something like play their Blood Artist and attack you. You can't block because they're going to get Blood Artist triggers that way, so you like have to take the damage, and so it's this really it's definitely a deck that puts you into like really tough spots if you're playing creatures. What do you think the deck is good against, and what is it bad against? What are some of the matchups like?
You basically just hit the nail on the head. As any deck trying to win through creature combat is really going to struggle against the Aristocrats. So like even aggro decks just aren't going to be fast enough to go under the Aristocrats. Aristocrats really crushes aggro decks. The one exception being mono red can sometimes get in enough damage that it can burn the Aristocrats deck out because it doesn't have that much life gain, but there are certainly draws from the Aristocrats that stymie mono red as well.
There's a couple of really important mono red cards that got printed very recently too that made that matchup even worse, which is Rampaging Ferocidon.
Oh, I hate that card.
And Harsh Mentor are both just like kind of nightmares. Like I beat Aristocrats playing mono red last Thursday, and that was why.
Actually,
it was like,
mentioning those cards reminds me that like there's a couple of like kryptonite cards to this deck. Those are two of them. Kalidas is the other one. Like Kalidas
is of those effects.
Yeah, any of those effects are. It's a complete nightmare.
Yeah.
Like Kalidas is the worst because not only are your sacrifice effects bad, in fact they don't even work.
No.
And they get benefit off of it. So Kalidas
they get the zombies.
Is 2 black for a 3/4 lifelink. If a non-token creature an opponent controls would die, instead exile that card and put a 2/2 black zombie onto the battlefield. Now, the thing that makes this really scary is that if you sack something or if it dies, you don't get a death trigger. You don't activate Morbid. It's a replacement effect. It's exiled instead, they get a zombie.
Yeah.
So, like, your deck is pretty cold to Kalidas. So, having ways to deal with this guy is pretty important.
Anyone notice that Kalidas is a warrior? It goes into the warriors deck? That's just
I knew that actually.
Kind of insane.
Somebody's got to build that at some point.
Powerful.
Both
Kalidases. Holy heck.
I have a side powerful Magic story. I played 5-color Zoo for a little while, and I did get to activate Nagila the Blade Blossom's activated ability.
Perfect.
Yeah, like, Aristocrats is a weird deck to play because, like, normally you have, like, a singular game plan that you're just, like, really in on. Whereas Aristocrats, you're sort of, like, kind of bending to how the draws go and trying to assemble, like, a synergistic board state that's going to, like, kill your opponent.
Yeah, Aristocrats really thrives in the games where, like, both people are playing creatures, neither person can attack, and you're both just casting whatever you draw every turn.
Yeah.
Aristocrats is, like...
Board stalls are great.
Yeah, and they really struggle against decks that don't want to interact with the board because their clock isn't actually very fast. Like, their creatures are often 1/1s.
Yeah, Tukatung Thalit is not going to beat anyone down all that fast.
Not really.
No. And especially since a lot of the creatures are often better after they die, like Brindleshout and cards like any card with Undying is better after it dies. If you don't have a sack outlet, you can't upgrade them fast enough, so lots of times your clock just isn't going to be fast enough to interact with the combo decks, and you don't play that much disruption.
Yeah, fair enough. Lastly, what do we usually see as points in these decks? Because I know it's sort of changed recently. People are playing kind of like 2 different kinds of point spreads.
Yeah, I just want to say like Demonic Tutor, because sometimes I just want to, go find something important. In the 4-color versions, I feel like Tainted Pact sees some amount of play because
not points anymore.
It's not
just free.
Oh right, it used to be. Well, okay, well when it was
points,
it used to get played because normally Tainted Pact is terrible in combo decks because you run the risk of like exiling your win conditions.
Yeah,
but because it's a synergy deck, you can just find like
I
need this type of card or this type of card. It doesn't matter which one.
And Tainted Pact really quickly is 1 in a black for an instant that says remove the top card of your library from the game, and then you can put that card into your hand, unless that's the same name as another card removed this way, and you can repeat this process until you put a card into your hand, or you remove 2 cards with the same name, whichever comes first. So if your entire deck is all different cards, this just finds a card. You can just remove cards until you find what you want. Are you about to tell them about playing snow-covered lands?
No, well, that's important. But I was going to say, like, Aristocrats also gets to free roll Diabolic Intent, which is really good.
Just got a hot reprint too.
Yeah, Diabolic Intent is Demonic Tutor, which is, except as an additional cost, sacrifice a creature.
Yeah.
And it's no points.
Yeah. So the 2 point spreads I've seen most commonly are 3 Moxen, and then Tainted Pact was usually the last point when it was points.
Maybe you get something else now.
Yeah, well, so now I've also seen this kind of interesting point spread as a bunch of stuff has dropped down. I saw someone playing...
2 Mogs Natural Order?
No, Demonic Tutor, Natural Order, Umezawa's Jite.
That's interesting.
That's 9. I forgot.
Stoneforge?
I don't know what their 10th point was. It might have been Stoneforge, but anyway, they were completely off the fast mana plan and just on a different plan entirely. So the reason the natural order plan might seem a little odd because you have to stick this Craterhoof Behemoth in your deck that basically has no hope of making 8 mana at any time.
Unless you have exactly Gaia's Cradle in play.
Yeah. But it's just like a powerful enough effect, and you always have a big board.
Do you know what just jumped into my head?
No.
That I don't know if anybody in Aristocrats has played. Survival of the Fittest. I think in a really creature-heavy build, I think that card could be real because you're sort of trying to find it's helping you tutor for the little.
There are some
combos.
really interesting cards you can play in that deck that would work really well with the survival plan. You can play Wake the Dead, which is X black return X target creature cards from your graveyard to play. They get exiled at end of turn or sacrificed.
Sacrifice, but you can only cast it after your opponent has attacked.
Yeah, combat on your opponent's turn. Then along the same lines, there's Rally the Ancestors, which exiles.
Yeah.
And Return from the Ranks, which gets X creatures CMC 2 or less.
Yeah.
Even
And so if you're playing Survival, it
Yeah.
can be really, really good.
that might be one to think about.
those
Because
effects.
I've seen Aristocrats decks play Living Death,
Yeah.
which is pretty goofy.
And so I've been thinking about those effects just like if you're in a board stall and don't quite have a wide enough board to just fireball them with Blood Artist, you can just sack literally your whole board, get them all back,
Sack your whole board
sack
again.
your whole board again. They're
Yeah, just run it back. That's
Yeah.
pretty hot.
Sweet. Well, does anyone have any closing thoughts on Aristocrats? Any other misconceptions we want to dispel? Anything like that? Or feel like that's a pretty reasonable summation of the deck?
Just to solidify it, I think the biggest misconceptions about the deck is that it's a combo deck.
Yeah, it's not.
just like-
It's not like because it's not a combo deck because you're going to be attacking with creatures sometimes.
Yeah, and I actually heard somebody played it the other night at a tournament at Yellow Jacket.
Yeah.
And I heard their opponent saying, "Oh, I was afraid you were going to combo me out," and the Aristocrats player was like, "No, it's really, really hard for me to combo you out." Like,
Almost never dealing 20.
Yeah.
Like, I just want to get chip damage in and then
Yeah.
create a board state. And so the person actually ended up losing the game because they were like holding up counter spells for this combo turn that was just like
That just never came.
coming, and they just like kept letting Brindle Shouts and Doom Travelers resolve.
Oops.
And
Classic blunder.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Or do you want to say that one?
I was just gonna say, I think the best versions of the deck are Mardu or 4-color.
Yes,
no
no
4-color,
blue.
no blue. There's like virtually no blue cards that are good in Aristocrats. I've always wanted to play Reefworm, but
it's very expensive.
it's very expensive. But it's so cool.
It is
I
very.
don't even know what that card does.
Reefworm
It
is
starts
3
as
and
a 1/1.
three and
then
a
Oh,
blue.
Reform. I
Yeah,
thought you were saying Reform.
Yeah, Reform. 3 and a blue for a worm. It's a 0/1. When it dies, make a 3/3 that says when this dies, make a 6/6 that says when this dies, make a 9/9.
Yeah. So you get to like get 3 triggers and make a 9/9 or whatever is best at the time.
Yeah.
That does sound pretty good.
Anywho.
All right, so the next deck we're going to talk about is Sorensen, or like Blue-Green Miracle Grow, or Blue-Green Tempo, whatever you want to call it. So Jared, you want to walk us through the basic setup of how this deck works?
Yeah,
I mean,
so
we
this
could-
is.
Sorry, just to cut you off, we should probably say why it's called Sorensen.
Oh, sure.
For those who don't know.
It's named after the originator of the deck, Robin. He created the archetype. Local player also created the Mulligan system.
Create a lot of things.
He's a really good player, really smart dude. So the deck named after him is a blue-green tempo-based strategy that mostly plays creatures that grow either as you cast spells or as you draw cards. So the classic ones are Quirion Dryad, which is 1 and a green for a 1/1 that whenever you cast a spell that is any color except for green, it gets a +1/+1 counter. Plays like Tarmogoyf, Scavenging Ooze, Another classic one is Lore Scale Codal, which is 1 blue-green for a 2/2. Whenever you draw a card, it gets a +1/+1 counter, and they've printed some new cards recently, like Mana Gorger Hydra, I guess is not that new anymore, but that card was a huge boon for that deck. The new one...
yeah, there was a brand new one.
Deep Root Champion.
Yeah, that's the one.
1 and a green for a 1/1. That's whenever you cast a non-creature spell, it gets +1/+1 counter. And then just as they keep printing more blue, really good blue spells, the deck also gets better. Like the Delve spells are certainly really great in this deck because you want to be playing a high number of non-creature spells. So you want to be playing lots of cantrips, fewer lands. This is one of the few decks that like you have to be very wary of your opponent playing Stifle and potentially more effects like Stifle.
Bind.
Yeah.
Trick Bind.
Trick Bind, Interdict, Void Slime.
Squelch.
Jeez.
Yeah.
That's weird. You don't want your activated abilities to get
Countered in some way.
Especially if you like squelch a fetch and draw a card, and that card like gives you an additional 2 power on the board.
Holy
your things
moly.
get +1/+1 counters.
Sorensen's definitely the kind of deck that has the most like gross, imbalanced games. Like you either just like you oftentimes will just like die a horrible death, or
Your opponent literally feels like
they can't play the game.
they're playing different games. Like,
Yeah.
They're like, you have like 12 power on board on turn 5. They have like 2 fewer lands than you. You still have a million cards in hand.
Yeah, you're passing every turn with 4 lands up.
Yeah.
3 of them are blue.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, I guess I'll die.
Yeah. I mean, but on the other hand, sometimes you like kill both their creatures and then they're like, go,
Yeah.
because
Yeah,
I mean,
just,
they're,
like,
you don't find another creature.
yeah, they're pretty in on like sticking 1, maybe 2 creatures
This is-
and then protecting
This
it,
is
right?
maybe the epitome of the Protect the Queen style of deck, where they certainly don't need more than 1 creature in play to get you, but if you're able to tax their protective counter magic or catch them when they're tapping out for creatures, then you can certainly punish this style of deck. So
Totally.
yeah.
So what's this deck good against, though?
This deck traditionally preys on combo decks. It's got a really fast clock, and especially if the decks aren't trying to remove their creatures, like the ability to like brainstorm to put 3 counters on a creature just like potentially gives you an insanely fast clock backed up by cheap counter magic.
Yeah, it's like if you want a deck that's like really going to take a poo on like hard combo, this one is going to get the job done.
And as previously mentioned, Stifles can often be really, really backbreaking to a lot of combo decks as well. Like
Just stifle the Storm Trigger on Tendrils.
yeah, or like stifling a key Paradox Trigger can often
Run them out of mana.
stymie the Paradox Academy deck, or stifling like a Inventor's Fair activation or something like that.
Totally.
What's this deck's worst matchup, though?
Typically aggro decks are the worst matchup, especially red-based aggro decks, because all their creatures start out really small. It's often called a miracle grow deck, so their creatures grow miraculously. And so if you're able to point red removal spells at their creatures before they've grown, then that's often the best way to get at this deck. And it's not actually very good at blocking, because once again their creatures come down and they're often very small. So
Yeah, I mean, like...
yeah, struggles against a quick clock mixed in with some
And I mean,
removal.
red has a lot of cheap removal.
Totally.
Because like the turns where it's just like 1 mana burn spell, 1 mana burn spell, and like you can't counter both of them, that seems like a pretty likely scenario to run into.
Yeah. This is one of the decks that has gotten like worse over time as they've printed better removal. Like Fatal Push getting printed was bad for this deck. People starting to play like Jeskai was very bad for this deck, because previously it was like pretty common that you'd either be playing against red removal or you'd play against white removal. Like you'd play against blue-white control or something, or you'd play against like mono-red or green-red or blue-red control. And like the red removal was bad, but once you grew your creatures out of the range of it, then you were kind of free. And the right removal was challenging because it was always going to kill your creatures, but there wasn't that much of it. But when people started combining that together, and now all of a sudden you're playing against the deck that has like Flame Slash, Swords to Plowshares, Path to Exile, Lightning Bolt, Searing Spear, Lightning Strike,
Flame Slash.
Flame Slash, War Leader's Helix, It's just like there's so many cards that will kill your grow creatures, and that deck has counter spells to fight over them.
Yikes.
So
Just bad news bears.
so it's tough. So this deck has definitely had to evolve a bunch too, I think. Where it used to be that you'd like only play creatures that grow, only play creatures that could really like high roll. I think increasingly now you're like kind of obligated to play creatures that start with higher toughness levels, and maybe have slightly lower ceilings in terms of how powerful they can get.
Maybe we'll see.
That being said, though, I think cards like Blossoming Defense really make this deck better. Like, that's exactly the kind of card this deck wants.
I guess you could play Blossoming Defense and was it Heroes? What is it called?
Heroic Intervention.
Yeah, Heroic Intervention.
That one might be too expensive. Not entirely sure, but
Yeah, I mean, it gets the job done. But yeah, I could see that. I feel like Wizards has been quietly printing a few cards that are good in this deck over the last while that we, maybe some have even been overlooked. And I don't know.
this is another deck where you could just start jamming all the 2-power, 2-mana flyers.
Just
go
go
at it
like
that
all
way.
evasion.
Yeah, like the guy's Skyfolk deck.
I know that's like what Pat started doing. Like,
I know, yeah.
yeah.
You were talking about higher toughness. Do you think Werebear's gonna get some work again?
No.
Come on.
It has
A
one. It has
relic
one,
of the past.
it has one
unfortunately.
toughness.
No, it has 4 toughness.
You just tax your own graveyard
Graveyard
so
so
hard because
much.
you want to play
Oh, right, you play
all
all
the
the
delve spells.
But what if you built it differently?
Yeah,
So that you didn't.
You could.
you could, but
Yeah.
even then, like 7 cards is probably like realistically happening by turn 4.
Probably.
So
Yeah. Still, I have such a soft spot for Werebear.
I mean that's fair.
It's a druid.
Can't fault you for that.
Is it a druid?
Druid bear.
It's a druid bear. I thought it's a human druid bear.
Well, yeah, it's a human who turned into a bear,
Yeah.
and they are a druid.
I mean, like the original text, he exercises his right to bear arms.
Well, now to become is to understand.
It's not as good.
Not as good. I
as
agree.
Yeah, the original flavor text is on point.
Werebear is a 1/1 for 1 and a green that gets +3/+3 if you have threshold. He also taps for green.
And he exercises the right to bear arms.
Yeah, because it's a pun. It's a play on words.
Yeah, I think sort of in summation, Sorensen's this really interesting deck that recently has been less explored, but is one that you definitely could play a lot if you wanted to.
Especially depending on your meta. It's like if
Yes.
everybody's jamming like degen combo, you're just like,
Yeah, it's very good against those decks.
time to hunt.
Yeah, totally. And so yeah, it's very good against the combo decks, not very good against the aggro decks, and sort of against the mid-range decks. It's high variance. Sometimes you're good against them, sometimes you're bad. It depends
Yeah.
on what their composition is.
Yeah, it depends on their draw. If they draw a bunch of 4-drops and maybe 1 removal spell,
Is
they're
that
looking
the-
good.
I was
If they draw 4 removal spells and 1 4-drop,
Yeah, is
you're
that
dead.
the matchup where you either feel like God or like this is a pile of playing cards?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the variance is really huge. Where you're just like, I can't lose, or it's like I cannot win
Yeah.
in any situation. So
And part of that comes down to just like making better mulligan decisions and
yeah,
like playing better. Certainly you can reduce a lot of that variance just by playing the deck a lot though.
Yep. And yeah, this is one of the decks that will reward you for playing millions and millions of games with it. You will steadily see your win percentage
it'll teach you
improve.
good magic.
Yeah.
So
All right. Any final thoughts on Sorensen before we move on?
bring back Sorensen.
All right. The next deck we're going to talk about is Death and Taxes. So Death and Taxes is like a mono white or white weenie strategy, and the reason we've titled it Death and Taxes and not white weenie or mono white is because they're sort of different things and they are 2 different decks. So white weenie is like sort of like 1 mana 2 power creature deck.
Honor
It's
the Pure.
Honor the Pure, that sort of thing, and it's not very popular and it's not nearly as good as this deck. This deck, Death and Taxes, is instead looking to leverage really powerful 2 and 3 drop creatures as well as the best 1-drops. But like Savannah Alliance does not make the cut
No,
anymore.
so it's playing Kytheon,
Yes,
Mother of Runes,
Soldier of the Pantheon,
Soldier of the Pantheon, Mardu Woe Reaper.
and the new one, the one that
Oh,
gives
Dauntless Bodyguard.
Dauntless Bodyguard. That one's quite good.
Yeah, but that's almost it.
Yeah, and then after that, you're playing all the 2 and 3 mana white creatures that you sort of think of from other Eternal formats. So it has all the hate bears you'd think of, like Thalia, Containment Priest, Aethersworn Canonist sometimes.
Spirit of the Labyrinth.
Spirit of the Labyrinth.
The cat that doesn't let you search libraries unless you pay to.
I don't see Leonin Arbiter that often, but I guess
it's playable.
I've been seeing it recently.
I don't know. Yeah. And for those of you who pay attention to the Highlander scene in Victoria a lot, this is actually the deck that won the 2017 championships. It had black splashed in it, but basically the same idea. And so what this deck is trying to do is it's trying to set up a board of creatures that have obnoxious text and in a lot of instances are obnoxious to remove. You're leveraging equipment to get a leg up in mostly creature matchups. You're leveraging hate bears to get a leg up against the control and combo decks. And then lastly, you have a couple of like really big haymaker cards. And these are the Armageddons and the Cataclysm effects. And so this deck has this kind of awkward axis where you're fighting with it on board, but if at any time you overextend and fighting on the board and maybe tap out on the wrong turn, you can just lose all your lands and die on the spot. And one of the reasons this deck keeps getting better and better is that Wizards keeps printing better white creatures. So Brightling, for instance, is a messed up magic card and features in this deck. This is actually not the best Brightling deck in Highlander, but this card is very, very good. I had an opponent have this in play plus Aether Vial for 3, making it literally unkillable.
Welp.
Yeah, it was. I didn't win, let's just say. And yeah, so there just keep being more and more of these really powerful effects. I think one of the misconceptions about the deck that's important to dispel is that it is like an aggro deck, or that it's sort of like a lot of people still identify it with that white weenie kind of honor the pure sort of thing.
Well, because it does have a bunch of cards that are similar to that, and it does win by attacking you, but like
it's just going bigger.
It's like, you know, lower the amount of aggro and increase the amount of disruption in the deck.
And just overall power level. I think one of the biggest advents of this deck was putting in a bunch of the soul lands, like Mana Crypt, Soul Ring, and playing the Eldrazi creatures was one of the
That's such a weird splash.
Yeah, Reality Smasher and Thought-Knot Seer.
Yeah.
Yeah, this deck is sometimes played as like a technically 2-color deck, with the second color being colorless.
Yeah.
So yeah, it will play Reality Smasher, Thought-Knot Seer,
Eldrazi Displacer sometimes.
and Eldrazi Displacer, because it plays enough sort of colorless lands or soul lands that it can actually cast these things. And they're very powerful. Don't really see any play outside of this deck, but they're kind of messed up.
Yeah.
Just get them.
Yeah, they're just so aggressively costed. Like, this is a... Do you mind if I spoil the...
No, it's fine.
Oh yeah, Liam was playing in the finals of this last Monday, and he was playing against this deck, and his opponent in Game 2, their opening hand was City of Traders, Ancient Tomb, Mox Pearl, Soul Ring, Plains, Reality Smasher, Aether Vial, and they were on the draw, so they had another threat. I think it was Brightling.
Oh my god!
And so they like tried to figure it out. They couldn't quite cast Reality Smasher on turn 1, so instead they just played Aether Vial, and then certainly cast Reality Smasher on 2. Thought the game was over, but Liam had Force of Will, and then Liam proceeded to lose to the aforementioned Brightling plus Aether Vial on 3 combination.
That's dirty.
Yeah, it was just seeing that opening hand was like, oh my god.
So that's the other thing the deck does. This is definitely one of the stronger decks at leveraging fast mana. And part of the reason for that is that it's not actually like a green deck. So the fast mana you're playing is limited. So when you draw it, it's higher impact. It's not as though you're a green deck where you're sort of like planning to have an elf every game. You're just like this deck playing a bunch of really high power level cards that you occasionally cast a turn or 2 ahead of time.
This one plays the 4-mana Planeswalkers?
Yeah, some of them. It plays Gideon Ally of Zendikar.
I was going to say, like, with fast mana, you could pretty reliably stick one of those on 2.
Not reliably.
Not reliably, but it could happen.
But you can, yeah, and you can play them on 3. I mean, the thing about this deck and the reason why it's powerful is that the non-fast mana draws are really powerful, and the fast mana draws are busted.
Yeah.
So it's not as high variance as some of the other fast mana decks where they're like if you look at a deck like Big Idiot Dragons, is like, well, if I have fast mana, I'm gonna win, and if I don't have fast mana, I'm mulliganing until I have fast mana because I cannot otherwise. Whereas this deck is like, well, yeah, like if I'm just playing a regular game where I play a land every turn, I might win. And if I play a game where I cast a Mana Crypt or a Soul Ring in the early game, I'm way, way more likely to win. And you're not, but you're not all in on it, which is, really powerful. I think this is also maybe the deck that best highlights how powerful cards like Umezawa's Jitte are, because this deck sees it the most often. And so, like...
Well, because you're playing...
Steel Shaper's Gift and Stoneforge Mystic.
And Relic Seeker often.
And Relic Seeker. So you often have 3 ways to find this card. And, I mean, we don't have to tell you that Umezawa's Jitte is powerful. It's very obvious that it is.
It's a really stupidly broken card.
Yeah, and so what that means is that this deck just like kind of doesn't have bad matchups. It's got harder matchups, but like it's very good against a lot of the field, which is I think part of why it's so powerful.
That's the biggest misconception of the deck, is that you line this deck up next to like a Mardu mid-range deck, and the Mardu mid-range player is like, oh yeah, I crushed this matchup, and then you play it like 10 times, and the Mardu deck like it'll win like between 4 and 6 times.
Yep.
But the matchup is super close, and traditionally that's the kind of deck that just like should destroy this matchup, but it doesn't, because this deck is so brutally efficient at what it does, and like just has like the trump cards. Like if it's ahead on board, especially with a piece of fast mana and just gets to cast an Armageddon, the mid-range decks like don't stand a chance.
Yeah. And I mean, this is one of the first monocolored decks that's gotten to get to that point where all the cards are good. Because with the decks like mono green and mono black, like the aggro decks at least, or the sort of like more aggro slanted mid-range decks, you're still playing like a couple of like cards that well, not necessarily clunkers, but they're just like, they're okay powerful, but they're not necessarily synergistic. Whereas like the Death and Taxes deck is either, the cards are either insanely powerful, they're like Brimaz, Brightling kind of power level, or they're incredibly synergistic, like Relic Seeker, that sort of thing. And none of the other colors have really gotten to that point yet where they have enough of a synergy. Like I think there's like a mono red Taxes deck that's like starting to approach that, but it still needs like 15 more cards that do sort of Harsh Mentor or Rampaging Ferocodon-esque things. So yeah, this deck is really brutal, hard to play against. And yeah, as we're saying, like its best matchups are probably the combo decks.
I think so.
It sort of depends, because the deck can be teched different ways, but especially when it's trying to beat the combo decks, this deck is insane against the combo decks. And then it's pretty good, I would say, against control. And then also mono red, it annihilates. It's really, really good against mono red.
Yeah, I actually think its roughest matchups are like non-mono red aggro decks. Like
Yes.
I think if there's a bunch of this deck running around, I actually think Gruul is like maybe the best deck.
Get him.
Or like green-white.
Yeah, green-white also is very good.
Yeah. One of the only ways to beat this deck is going bigger than it, by playing bigger creatures, because this is the one area that they're a little deficient, is that they don't have great removal. There are not that, like I was saying earlier, there are not that many white removal spells, and so...
Yeah, like, is this deck in on like Swords to Plowshares, Path to Exile, Dismember...
It doesn't play Dismember, but but
Council's Judgment.
Council's Judgment, Declaration in Stone, and Journey to Nowhere are all in the deck. And like you look at a card like Journey to Nowhere and you think like, really? Like you're actually playing that card? But it's just like
they have to.
They just have to. They just have to have enough depth of removal that they're not just going to die to things.
Could this one play the new one with Flash?
Seal Away?
Yeah.
Probably, but the issue is that like you really want all your removal spells to hit Platinum Empyrean, and Platinum Empyrean often isn't attacking you.
Ah, right.
Yeah.
Ironic that it's sealing a giant robot, but not the giant robot that you want, unfortunately.
The one you deserve.
Half the time, yeah.
Fair.
But yeah, so anyway, so this deck's really powerful. It's sort of interesting because it's probably the newest of the decks we've talked about so far.
Yeah.
In terms of like, it's really only been like tuned and developed in the last 2 years into what it is now. Because previously people would sort of play, as we were talking about, the White Weenie deck, or people would play like white Hate Bears decks. But yeah, Adam Thorne, the 2017 championship winner, definitely like took this deck and made it
Brief aside,
miles better.
Hate Bears is sort of a catch-all phrase that encompasses any sort of like roughly 2 mana, roughly 2 power toughness creature, i.e. a bear, that has an effect that hates something, i.e. a taxation effect, something that usually prevents something from happening that you want your opponent to not be able to do.
Yeah, it's just anything that makes your opponent's game plan slightly more difficult to perform.
So it's like, oh, I can't search for stuff, or like I can't draw more than one card per turn, or my spells cost more.
Or their creatures come in tapped. That one's the most innocuous, but sometimes
It's
matters.
so good!
Yeah, Thalia, Heretic Cathar, the 2 and a white new Thalia that says lands, non-basic lands and creatures your opponent controls.
It's so much better because, like...
Enter the battlefield tapped.
Like, do you know how bad haste creatures are against this effect?
Yeah.
They're garbage.
Well, and, like, fetch lands are atrocious.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, yeah, like, cards... So yeah, cards like that are just really powerful, right? Like, this card has the potential to almost win the game on its own, I think is an important aspect. But yeah, so anyway, so that's Death and Taxes. Anyone else have any kind of closing thoughts on the Death and Taxes archetype?
It's good.
Yeah, it's really good. I agree.
Probably, like, on the lower end of the cost spectrum as far as, like, tier 1, right?
Yeah, it's tier 1
I mean, it's monocolored. Sure. And yeah, it's definitely tier 1. I mean, Jared and I were talking about, like, it might be the best deck in the format. We're not really sure. It's definitely one of the best decks in the format.
Certainly tier 1.
The Eldrazi version?
Either.
Or just...
the version with Eldrazi or not.
Death and Taxes, not the Savannah Lions deck.
That
you don't need to play the Eldrazi cards, but
they're good.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah. All right. Well, so that's what we're going to talk about for those 3 decks. Feel free if you have additional questions, tweet at us. We're happy to answer them if we can. Yeah, we'll just keep this episode nice and short. So yeah, if you have any more questions, feel free to send them out to us. But without further ado, we're going to move to our closing segment, which is Powerful Magic. And on for today, Powerful Magic is me. As JR has already mentioned, I made the finals of the tournament this past Monday. Very unfortunate, did not manage to win. It was very close.
With a bang.
I know, yeah, it was a good run. And in the third round of the event, so I was playing Grixis Stuff, an archetype.
Grixis Stuff.
Yeah,
the archetype that's like most aligned with you.
It is totally, yeah. So like you can't really call it Grixis Control because like I had aggro creatures in my deck. Couldn't really call it aggro because I had like Mystic Confluence in my deck, and like I don't know. I played Splinter Twin and Dual Caster Mage and Twin Flame.
So wait. You were playing one of the decks that people send us to be deck doctored.
No, I mean
Yes, you were.
I had deck doctored it into the masterpiece it was.
Sure you did.
You made the finals.
I made the finals.
Results-oriented thinking.
I top 8'd a qualifier with this deck.
It's true.
Yeah, this deck's just
well,
good.
This version didn't have second right in it.
No, I didn't top 8 the qualifier with second right in my deck either.
Oh, I thought you did.
No.
Okay.
Well, please continue.
So this deck has a master plan for every matchup. In the aggro matchups, you have Madcap Experiment for Platinum Imperium, and that's your only plan. Your points are Demonic Tutor and Ancestral Recall, by the way.
Ooh, that's spicy.
So you can do that again, which is very nice, which is why I wanted to play the deck. So yeah, like in the aggro matchups, you're looking to use like Madcap Experiment plus some removal spells and kill them with some stuff. In the mid-range matchups, you're just going to grind with them using Ancestral Recall and Snapcaster Mage, that kind of garbage. It's very powerful. Against the control decks, you're like going to pressure them with a bunch of flash creatures like Pestermite and Nimble Obstructionist and Vendilion Click. We got all the angles covered. One of the angles I did not consider was the old combo matchup against Paradox Academy. Now my deck has counter spells in it, has like a Kolagon's Command as a shatter effect, so like I'm not stone dead.
Forgot the old braid at home.
Didn't put a braid in my deck, that's correct.
Play a braid, it's really good.
I think I left it in the mono red deck I had been playing before and forgot to switch it over, is what happened.
Sounds about right.
That does sound about right, I agree. So at any rate, I'm playing against a friend of the show, Nick, and in game 1, I won the die roll. Maybe he won the die roll. It doesn't really matter. I had the best possible start my deck can really have, which is like land go. Not a whole lot of decks have land go as their best possible starts, but it was good. And then on turn 2, I played Young Pyromancer, and then on turn 3, I got to cast a cantrip and have counterspell up. And so his deck develops quickly, but it doesn't develop quite quickly enough. And Young Pyromancer is just such an efficient clock that he played a spell on a turn, I countered it, and then I untapped, played another land, and attacked him and passed with 4 mana, untapped, and he conceded.
It's such a shame that Sorensen can't play Young Pyromancer.
Yeah, splashing the third color is a real cost, unfortunately, because this card is messed up. It's so good. But so I was sort of thinking like, all right, I stole that game. Now he's back on the play. Probably not winning this one because it's hard to win on the play. And actually, I should say I kind of stole game one because his first turn was land, Soul Ring, go. And then next turn he missed a land drop. It didn't play anything. So I got quite lucky to win that game, I think. But not as lucky as I got to win game two. So in game two, I'm going into the match thinking like, all right, I should keep a hand that like does some stuff, but realistically, like I should just try and do something powerful because this matchup's really difficult, and I'm probably going to lose on the draw, but I'll win on the play in the third game. And so my first turn is land, go. He was on the play though, so his first turn is land, mana crypt, tap mana crypt, play 2 mana mana rock, say go. Then I go to my turn, I play a land. I say go. We go to his turn. He loses a mana crypt flip. He had to shock himself as well. His first land was a shock land, so he's at 15. Then on my turn, I tap out to play Nightshade Familiar. Nightshade Familiar. Possibly a best card you're not playing. This is a 1 and a black for a zombie. It's a 1/1 zombie that for 1 and a black can regenerate, and your blue and red spells cost 1 less. So yeah, powerful card, sweet. And my hand's actually kind of set up. I have a Demonic Tutor in my hand, I have a Vendilion Click, I have a Counterspell and a Thoughtseize. So I'm sort of thinking like, oh, maybe this is going to be okay. I'm going to untap, I'm going to get to go Thoughtseize into hold up counter magic. I have a Disallow is in my hand, but since I have this old Nightscape Familiar, it's Counterspell. So my opponent untaps, loses Mana Crypt Flip, goes to 12. Then he plays another Mana Rock, then he plays Mindslaver, activates Mindslaver, because he has 10 mana already. He's had a rather explosive start. And then takes my next turn, so he untaps on my turn, he plays a land, casts my Demonic Tutor, failing to find, Thoughtseizes me, takes my Vendilion Click.
Ow!
Yeah, then he goes back to his turn, loses his Mana Crypt Flip, goes to 9. Then he plays some more stuff, but doesn't actually kill me. And one of the things he does is he actually casts Fabricate, and he can fabricate for Expedition map.
To set up Academy Ruins.
Yeah, to set up Academy Ruins to have the lock, but he's got this pesky
Mana
Crypt, so it's not actually a reliable loop. So instead he goes and gets Memory Jar, taps out the rest of his mana to play Memory Jar, and then passes to me. I get to untap and crack in with this Nightscape Familiar, and then say go.
He's at 8.
Yeah, he's at 8. Then he loses a Mana Crypt Flip, goes to 5. Gains a life off his Inventor's Fair that's in play, so back up to 6. Then he tries to crack the Memory Jar, but I have Disallow, so I get to disallow the Memory Jar.
Like you do.
Yeah, very powerful. Then he cracks his Inventor's Fair, finds Sensei's Divining Top, spins the top, doesn't find anything, cracks a fetch land, goes back to 5, and spins the top again, passes back to me. I play a land and then attack, put him down to 4, then pass back to him, and we're in his upkeep, and he loses his Mana Crypt Flip. And so then he's at 1. He's at 1. So then before anything else happens, I attempt to cast the old Clutch of the Undercity, which is 1 blue, blue, black, for an instant that says return target permanent to its owner's hand.
Yeah, using it for its alternate mode.
Yeah, its controller loses 3 life, also known as Bump in the Night. And he was able to he flipped his top and drew 5 cards with Stroke of Genius in response, but then died. So I just had no business winning this game. I missed some parts of what my opponent did, but it involved playing Grim Monolith and Voltaic
a bunch
Key.
of mana.
Yeah. I misrepresented his turn 1. His turn 1 was land, Mana Rock, Mana Crypt, Grim Monolith, tap Grim Monolith, play Voltaic Key, untap Grim Monolith, play another 4 mana Mana Rock.
Holy
go.
Schmoly.
Yeah, so his opening was insane. I have no business winning this game. So sorry, Nick. We did do the math. It's 3.1% for that to happen, to lose 5 flips in a row.
In a row.
Sounds about right.
In a row, yeah. He lost 5 of the 5 flips. He lost every flip in the game.
15 damage for no mana at all.
None, yeah, 0. And 2 more from his...
that was free.
Yeah. He took 2 damage from his shock land as well. So I dealt a whopping 5 damage that game. 2 Nightscape Familiar attacks and a Clutch of the Undercity. But it was powerful, let's just say.
A game of skill.
Yeah, best wizard won.
No luck involved.
Best wizard always wins. So that's my powerful magic story for today. Thanks so much for watching. The deck lists for these 3 decks, we'll get some lists up for you. They'll be in the description below. Once again, a reminder that this, like everything on the Loading Ready Run Video Network, is brought to you by you over at patreon.com/loadingreadyrun. So thanks so much for your support. We couldn't do it without you. And without further ado, we'll see you on Friday for the Coaches Challenge on Friday Night Paper Fight.
Ooh, I'm excited for that one.